Judas has been a highly anticipated first-person shooter ever since its first trailer dropped at the Game Awards in 2022, and kinda blew everyone away. And now a robotic horseload of new content and information has hit the airwaves via a recent PlayStation blog. What better time than now to both get hyped and educated on what could well be one of the most distinctive AAA releases of the next few years. With this in mind, I'm Josh, this is FGS, and these are 7 things you need to know about Judas. Judas will be the first release from Ghost Story Games, with much of the excitement stemming from its director Ken Levine, best known for his acclaimed work on System Shock 2 and creating the iconic Bioshock franchise. Levine's track record is tough to deny, but with Judas being a first-person sci-fi shooter, unavoidably it's being likened to both System Shock and Bioshock. The hype basically builds itself. Even accepting the game's much discussed development time, which we'll get back to later, Levine's penchant for perspective writing and atmospheric gameplay speaks for itself, so why expect any different here? Though some have dubbed Judas Bioshock in space, Levine has assured players that the game will be quite different and, above all else, considerably more challenging, so be ready for that. But now that we know who's behind the game, what on earth is Judas actually about?
Please do this for me, Judas. Help me end this thing.
Judas takes place on a spaceship called the Mayflower, which is transporting the remnants of humanity to the star Proxima Centauri. However, a calamity leaves the ship disintegrating, a calamity caused by our mysterious protagonist herself, known as Judas. She must find a way to survive, whilst also dealing with the 3 factions vying for power aboard the doomed ship. Those consist of Tom, who wants to preserve humanity in its flesh and blood form, his wife Nefertiti, who wants to transform what remains of humanity into robots, and their adopted daughter Hope, who wants to, erase herself from existence. It'll fall to players to either join forces with these factions or wage war against them, while leading a revolution aboard the Mayflower. Though the marketing is clearly holding many of the story's finer beats close to its chest, it's clear that players will have a high degree of freedom to steer the story in their preferred direction.
Your mission has failed, Tom. The flesh was not meant to survive on Proxima.
Now there's still room for you in the mission, Neffy, I swear.
Don't you ever call me that again.
Another major question is the title character herself, a seemingly cyborg hacker around whom the Mayflower's central disaster revolves. As it turns out, Judas causes chaos on board the Mayflower when she informs Tom, Nefertiti, and Hope that they're actually machines, a fact they were initially unaware of. This causes the trio to, naturally, go into full existential crisis, effectively leaving the Mayflower rudderless and Judas scrambling to escape the ship before it's too late. Judas's decision to drop a truth bomb has in turn left her hugely unpopular for the Mayflower, many passengers opting to verbally and physically abuse her, while also giving her that titular nickname. Again, the marketing has only given away small slivers of who Judas is so far, but it's clear she's going to be a seriously embattled heroine as she desperately fights to make it off the Mayflower in one piece.
J stands for Judas!
We know who our hero is, so who then are the villains of the piece? Well, according to a recent PlayStation blog post, that role is kinda down to you. Speaking on the new villainy mechanic, Levine writes that your actions within Judas will affect your reputation with the big 3, and as you potentially draw one of them closer to you, the others will seek to retaliate. And should you push down a certain path, they will eventually fulfill that role and start unleashing hellfire at you at every turn. The big 3 are a scrutinous bunch and will analyze how you approach combat, how you craft, how you hack, and how you treat others you come into contact with. As Levine notes, they can bribe you, save you, talk shit about the other characters, and share with you their darkest secrets. But eventually, you've got to decide who you trust and who you don't. Levine has promised that Judas will be considerably less linear than the Bioshock games. For one, he's talked up the idea of designing the narrative like bricks of Lego, where each player choice has a small immediate impact on the overall story, but over the course of the game, this can have massive variations. For instance, the means through which you interact with Tom, Nefertiti, and Hope can have a major ripple effect on the gameplay. If you're chummy with one of them, they might help you out in combat, but get on their wrong side and they may lock down areas of the Mayflower to make your life harder. And then there's the fact that Judas's core gameplay loop is heavily inspired by roguelikes. For one, dying is an expected part of the genre, and upon perishing, your body will simply be reprinted to continue the mission, but whilst being reprinted, you can opt to change and improve not only aspects of yourself, but also of the Mayflower, meaning that in theory, no two runs are the same. And yet, despite all this, Levine has gone out of his way to insist that Judas isn't pure roguelike, but rather incorporates aspects of the genre into a first-person shooter, potentially a la something like Deathloop. As much as Levine has insisted Judas isn't another Bioshock game, its approach to combat and abilities can't not be compared to his previous work. First and foremost, just like Bioshock, you'll use one hand to operate weapons, and the other to harness hacking-centric abilities. This can include taking control of robotic foes and turning them into kamikaze bombers, or electrifying the water to make short work of several enemies at once. As for weapons, so far we've seen tons of the usual suspects such as pistols, shotguns, rifles, and even crossbows, while in terms of melee, a hammer seems to be taking the place of Bioshock's iconic wrench. All that being said, however, Levine has made it clear that Judas will be less reliant on run and gun combat than the Bioshock games, especially Infinite, encouraging players to use stealth or hacking abilities in place of direct encounters. Judas is Ken Levine's first game since shipping the Bioshock Infinite DLC, Burial at Sea, in 2014. He supposedly began conceptualizing the game that very same year. Levine spoke publicly about the then unnamed project as soon as 2015, but many years followed without substantial updates, blowing past a planned internal release date of 2017. By 2022, with the game still not formally revealed, it was reported that it was in development hell, with Levine's managerial style being heavily criticized and even causing many of the studio's founding members to quit. Judas was eventually unveiled at the end of the year to a positive response, yet the game also ended up missing a projected release date from parent company Take-Two, who expected it to drop in March 2025 at the latest. Judas certainly looks terrific, and there's every possibility it'll end up being worth the prolonged squeeze, but given it's been cooking for 11 years now, it's getting dangerously close to Duke Nukem Forever's infamous history-making 14-year development cycle. At present, Judas doesn't have an announced release date, and considering that Take-Two expected it to release for PC, PS5, and Xbox platforms several months ago, it's evidently well behind schedule. Plus, with Judas skipping the recent Summer Games Fest, it seems unlikely that the game will be released this year, and so fans probably are gonna have to wait until 2026 at the earliest. But honestly, considering that everyone wants to get their AAA titles away from Grand Theft Auto 6, combined with Judas's protracted development, 2027 might be the safer bet here. Heck, it's certainly not outside the realm of possibility that Judas finally launches after Sony and Microsoft have released their next-gen offerings in late 2027 or early 2028. Could Judas end up shifting to the PS6 and whatever Xbox do next? Stranger things have certainly happened. We can only hope then that Levine gets his ducks in a row and the game lands a little earlier than that. I'm not Jules Gill, this is FGS, and please be sure to subscribe before you leave. It really helps us out.